Good morning, Dr. Field. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Good. Thank you for joining us for our last observation. I sent you an agenda, and what I'm going to do is walk down that agenda, and then we'll talk about the bits and pieces that we're going to cover. So, as you know, I'm part of the district regulations committee, and as part of that, we were tasked to, well, I am the elementary representative, and so as part of that, we were tasked to have a cyclical review of regulations that are particularly older. So there are some regulations that are 3, 8, 10 years old that haven't been updated. So what I'll do is I'll pull a subcommittee of standing principals, campus principals. My thought is to pull 2 from each feeder pattern so that we have representation of the entire district of the elementary and look at the number of regulations that are potentially outdated. The whole point behind that is to just make sure that we have best practices. And if something is outdated by 8 years, which is pre-COVID, that it's updated and that we can ensure that everybody follows the laws that it's based upon. So the purpose of our conference here is just to discuss the process that I'm going to have with the subcommittee and the implications it has for the district. Okay. So the presentation, the first part we're going to do is obviously there's going to be a greeting, but what I want to do is solidify their knowledge base. And so we'll talk about how laws are created, and then based upon those laws, the district mandates policy that helps us fall in line with the law. And then there's a gap between policy and what best practice is. So that's where regulations come in. Regulations are the way to help us make sure there's equity and a continuity across the district from campus to campus so that we can ensure that we're following policy with best practice. The next piece that I'll do is I will set the purpose with the committee. And so we want to examine the regulations that cross many different policies, many headings of policy. So business and support services, instruction, student affairs, and then the community and governmental relations. And all of those regulations are anywhere from 3 to 10 years old. We'll determine if those regulations are still current and best practices as a whole. One of the pieces is also that the committee will put eyes on the language and the specific titles that are within those regulations. So for instance, if it says the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction will handle this. Well, we don't have a curriculum instruction. We have a teaching and learning department. So ways to update those. And then as a, not necessarily a byproduct, but a way for current principals to see what the regulations are and then reinforce their best practices. Because I would imagine that there's a number of regulations that either have never had eyes on them before or they needed a refresher. So from that point, what we'll do is we'll break into small groups. So I'm thinking 2, 2, 2, and 2, or some sort of variation. And then we'll examine those and then do some crosstalk. And then based upon that, we will have a final recommendation based on their conversations. I want an ending where I want to hear their takeaways from the process, as well as strong recommendations for specific regulations. So that's kind of the plan in a nutshell. I bet you've got some thoughts on it.
No, I mean, I'm not a whole lot. You've got great plans in place, and I'm so glad you're spending some time at the beginning of the meeting talking to them about what is policy, making sure that everybody has a foundational understanding, because I don't think a lot of campus administrators do. I'm also curious, and this really isn't the task that you're after with this project, but how can we better familiarize our campus administrators, not just with policy, but with regulation as well? Because we have had we've had a lot of changes to regulations in the couple of years that I've been here, in addition to the fact that right now we're reviewing the ones that you're mentioning that are a lot older. We need to have more people's eyes on them. So that might be something we can talk about afterward, just what your thoughts are around how to keep principals aware of policy changes and the regulations that come from that, just on an ongoing, continuous basis, so that we have a better informed team of administrators.
And I would agree with that thought that yes, I equate it to our emergency operations manuals that we have. We have binders and binders full of them. How often do we go through those and ensure best practices other than when our director or coordinator of safety and security comes through it? So I think you bring up a good point. So I'll be curious to hear what the committee has to say.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I'm really glad you're helping us out with this, Mike. It's a big help.
Well, I'm honored to do it.
All right. Thanks.
All right. You're welcome. And if there aren't any further questions, then I will just see you the next time.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Fields.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Well, welcome each and every one of you, all 7 of you. I think you all know me. I'm Mike Proddy. I want to thank you for being part of the regulations subcommittee. I'm on the regs committee, and so as that, I'm the elementary representative. And I will talk about what our role is here. The agenda is we want to solidify our knowledge base first. Then we set the purpose for the meeting. We're going to examine regulations, and we'll talk about what that looks like in just a little bit. We're going to have a little bit of crosstalk between groups, and then what we will do is make final recommendations based on the regulations and the exhibits to central office, and they will run it through their department as well. So we are an advisory committee. So our continuum whenever we think about regulations is that everything starts with law. So our legislature makes laws that we must follow. The board then adopts specific policy, which are how we interpret those laws through education. I like to think you jump over regulations and go into best practices. So that is why each of you are here. You are seasoned principals. You know what best practices look like on a campus. We have representation from every feeder pattern, and that was the goal, that we can incorporate the entire district within this piece to make sure that we're following the rules. Regulations are kind of that middle ground between. It's the how-to between what the board policy sets and then the best practice that we look for. So law, again, is that set of rules or guidelines that's established by a school or district, and it just really looks for best practices to maintain safety, promote a positive learning environment, and of course comply with legal and educational standards. Dr. Royal, would you mind reading us what regulations are?
Specific rules or directives derived from broader school policies. They provide detailed, actionable procedures and expectations that guide the day-to-day operations and behavior of students, staff, and other stakeholders within the school community.
And so what we've been tasked to do is, at the Regs Committee, Taylor Morris has realized that there are some regulations that are 3, 8, 12 years old that may not be best practice any longer. And so who better to examine it than a group of campus leaders to make sure that those best practices are taking place. And so best practices, we've talked about that. Those are the evidence-based, the ways that we've adopted as schools. So we'll be looking at some specific policies. We'll be looking at the business and support services. So each one of those will be led with a C, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You'll have your instruction policy, your students policy, and then your community and governmental relations policies. So we'll be examining the regulations that relate directly to those. You have a file folder in front of you that has about 1 million policies in there. Those will be the pieces that we kind of look at, but I figured it was important to see what the anatomy of a regulation looks like. So of course you've got the district number up here. Our next is the policy that goes with it. And you'll see that there are regulations, such as the reg that was specifically written. There are also exhibits. And so the exhibit is kind of like the companion piece that kind of helps you walk through and aid you through the next piece. You'll see a specific heading for each one of your regulations, and then little subheadings. So the heading here is admissions. The subheading is the verification and age. And so that's the subheading, and then each one has a descriptor of what those little pieces are through it. At the very bottom, you can see the date issued. So you can see this one is about 7 years old, and then it tells you on the bottom right if it's a singular page, 1 of 1, if it's multiple pages, 1 of 2, so on and so forth. So I've separated in your file folder the different regulations between each policy. So you'll see like C, and then you'll see a colored sheet of paper that separates C from D, and so on and so forth. So our role as a subcommittee is we are going to examine the regulations that are 3+ years old. These were the ones that were pulled that were most relevant to our roles on the campus level. We're going to also see if these are the current practices on the campus. And then we're putting eyes on to update language and titles as well. So you have all these little components that play into it. Things being so old, I found some that talk about the superintendent of curriculum and instruction. Well, that title doesn't exist in the district anymore. So that's a way for us to update. Also, as a byproduct, we're also going to make sure that we're refreshing ourselves with the best practices as well. We know that over time things can get watered down a little bit and we go off memory, and so sometimes we've got to sharpen that memory a little bit. So the way that we'll do this is we've got 7 here, so I figure we'll do a couple breakout sessions. So we'll have a group of 3, group of 2, and the first part is just to look through the regulations with your partner, kind of talk about some bits and pieces, and then from there, what we'll do is we'll do some crosstalk and come up with final recommendations. So nothing taxing, nothing hard. Again, snacks and drinks are over there, and then I'll walk around and see if you have any questions or need any support. So we'll take about 30 minutes for that piece. And then if the music's too loud or bothersome, just let me know.
I know, yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to have this whole cheese sandwich.
That's just embarrassing. It's not even, okay, so.
It's government cheese.
But if you're gonna do that, then that needs to be notified, like beforehand, where the child is literally have their tray.
In their hand.
And then
They
they're
taking it away.
And it'll be trash.
Which that's why they need to
Put that
inform
in
the
your
parent.
do not refrigerate.
Because the
Okay.
parents might decide to send them a lunch or either money.
Correct.
You know what I mean? I think that communication needs to go from the food manager straight directly to the parents.
Where is it saying?
It's the second little paragraph.
On the seven.
But then the next
Oh,
one's like,
I was like, is it across that?
okay, they don't let this happen anymore, right? The food bank. School food banks are an effort to reduce the amount of wasted food and encourage the consumption of food. Children can place unconsumed food and beverage items they choose not to eat in the food bank. This provides other children the opportunity they still have.
They call it the sharing
They
table
changed
now.
it this year, I don't know, we were at some training, and she went up and said that it was gonna restore it or something.
Oh, okay. I remember
It's a
saying
place
that.
to put it.
Yeah, it just can't go.
It's just like
area.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's-
Because it had even if it was still packaged, like touched. And they used to get rid of it. Okay. Combination of food banks. Wow.
Maybe.
Those nutty nutties.
So you guys are moving along pretty good. I'd say let's work for another 15 minutes or so, and then we'll kind of come together and talk about what recommendations we have. I think mostly we're getting through C, which is the business side of things, policy C. But if you're moving faster than another group, feel free to put in your recommendations, and we'll gather those at the end and then push them forward to the regs committee. I'll put on a little bit more music for you.
What is hot water?
Did you?
All we need is a full drop off, really sanitize with bleach and hot water prior to starting.
No. Yeah.
Hot water, most testing the strips may be obtained from the cafeteria. Students will
I've been gone, I'm sorry, I've moved to the transportation. The district may apply to obtain supplemental state funding for transporting regular, otherwise.
Another package?
Okay, first
Yes.
of all, Bryce, what is,
That's
what
what
you
that,
on?
no,
Oh, you put food
Yeah.
services down together. That's all I was like, you.
the rest of it, I'm like, I think that's okay, it's just.
So it's big and thick. There's, but it's 42 pages. There's some pieces.
Then they want it to be.
But a lot of people don't know about it.
Okay, I'd like to hear more about this.
Oh,
Because it says, okay, let's talk about each classroom teacher. Is that, it says classroom teacher, but is it implied speech pathologists? People who are not teachers under what?
so I've been trained as campus intervention specialists, instructional coaches, don't get conflict with these are not classroom teachers.
Okay.
I think it would almost revert back to when we had you have a class attached to you with 100 kids,
Right. You're not entitled to that.
and that's what I would think about that 450. But asking for clarity is a recommendation.
I would just like clarity, just so I can know what to say. Because like even with my sped teachers, they have conference times, and they have their 30-minute lunch. And so, correct.
Is it an SSD? You have an SSD, don't you? Does she have a contact period?
If she were to see a group of students, like specifically, she did,
And it says it's time to start the duty free lunch. It says each classroom teacher or full-time member is entitled to a 30-minute lunch. It doesn't say that for anybody else.
And is that someone who's under a classroom teacher contract? Like that?
but
That's
I know
like,
that the SSTs are under teacher contract.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. I think this just needs to be clear. Because you're gonna have all kinds of people with every position that might look at it.
And is it
More clarification.
up to the principal?
Where's that?
It's on one of one, on,
After your goal sheet, so she went to another policy. Yeah.
no, I did, I looked at
Jumped
that.
into personnel, correct? I didn't do personnel. If I remember correctly.
Yes, it is. I'm just gonna put more clarity in the piece. Because it doesn't say anything about counselors.
Actually, it has it.
Surely they're entitled to a 30-minute lunch, but I mean,
Yeah, I've seen the process.
right here
The
behind the
first,
yellow,
the first.
the first one behind the yellow, it's just one of one.
This acceleration testing, did you ever have to do that when you were teaching?
Acceleration
Or did
testing.
it like skip over grade acceleration?
So Harless,
Yes,
Harless would
yes,
take
they
it.
did that all the time. She still does it at Cross. Kids come up over summer from all over the district, and they have to pass tests if they want to skip. My counselor does it at Cross, but it might be at other places.
Get moved to first grade.
It says
This year?
entry on, so.
Oh,
No kindergarten tested.
I haven't gotten that
Test
far.
them on September.
Maybe it should
They-
just
And they placed
be,
in first grade.
maybe it should just be open like at a district
Yeah.
facility, because my counselor does it, but maybe it's just at Cross because she does it. Like, if another counselor at another school did it, it would be their campus.
I was here requesting. We had retained the leader. And then the next year, she went and skipped the next year. Yeah, my baby was ready. Usually,
Yes,
yeah,
it's in there.
no one here.
That's what it says, $25.
Yes. And it only happens at so many points in the year, it's not just any time.
Yeah, I thought it was the beginning, isn't it?
I know it's summer, it happens a lot over summer, but then, what does it say? Yeah, that sounds about right. It's hard, a lot of them, I mean, because they have to take separate tests, different tests, usually it's the social studies that gets it.
So that is all of your record retention dates, 30 years for
Know about
each.
this stuff.
This is from.
Yeah, you do, because you've been here for a while. Maybe we can make changes.
I accept that.
So, I mean, you can look at it and leave it, yeah.
That's the only thing.
I say we come back to it. We're going back, we're skipping the back this way right now. So now we're on the sheet after this.
So we'll give it about 3 more minutes, and then we'll do some cross groups. See if they'll need a break. You guys are working pretty good.
That's pretty interesting. They might, this needs to be a part of the principal. Yes, seriously. Because this is the minute you start rolling that out, well, you know what, regulations, I'm like, well, no one gave me the novel.
Yeah, but there is a lot of valuable information.
Jonathan's like, and nobody agrees with Ron. Jonathan's like, Ron. You know, one thing. I just want to do my job.
All right, so I know this front group's kind of been working as a whole group. Have y'all been working as a whole group as well? Yeah. Pretty much? Okay. So what I'd like to do is break y'all in half and then intermix groups. So whether it's these two move over to that table, two people move over here, and give y'all, okay, so don't worry, one more where you're talking through notes and you're coming up to consensus between the two tables. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, because I know that this group is pointing out some things that I didn't hear over in this group. You guys have gotten a little bit further, so if there's any points of interest you want to talk, and I only want to spend about 20 minutes doing that total. And then at that point, we just talk about things that we think are most important, and then I send you along your way. And thank you for your hard work and your time. I know there's a lot going on campus, especially this week.
Oh.
Those two move over there. So which two over here?
I'll go.
Oh, okay, good.
There we go. Jonathan and Ms. Price will make their way over. So someone will figure out who's going to be the scribe.
We made it through, we got to Shaq. Oh, right. We met through assignment. So we were at Wellness and Health Center. We're gonna come together.
So the idea is that we take the individual notes, we're bringing the groups together, and then you're having conversations. Hey, this is what we talked about, this is what we found.
Perfect.
We thought we needed clarity here, and this is antiquated, needs to be updated.
Got it.
And you want it on this new one?
Yes. Or you can put it on one that you already have, just indicate with a highlighter or something that
Why don't we do that?
that's what you want to submit.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll go
I
20
will
minutes.
scrap it. Okay.
That'd be-
And
that's tough.
transportation, or we all get his transportation? Okay. On the next one, one of the things that we talked about, we
Current
number
notes,
4
highlight things that you recommend.
was
You can do that.
an active process. And
Fresh
then
set.
on number 5, well, we felt like that should say topics. We added the word safe in there to number 6. And then number 7 and 9 were designated, I don't know why. So why didn't I do that? Oh, that's right, yeah.
So we added, yeah, on number 4, that we talked about, if it is not, that's fine. We said, and report findings to members from the, okay? And then we had number 1, so
Yeah, but
let me know what's going on, so we're not gonna see me every 3 years, or, you know, we're not seeing our special meeting. Because I think that also will open up dialogue.
Yes.
That might be the reason for some of those concerns. So that's one that we added, yeah. Oh, yeah. But other than that, we have. Yeah.
perfect. On the next one, we
Oh,
did-
sorry, no, back.
Backside. I don't think we did the backside.
Okay. So for cafeteria and concessions, it says that the funds will be deposited daily. Okay. So we said these funds will be secured, they will be the same.
Okay, so 6.
Because they don't.
Yeah. Okay, so that is what you told me, that's what we're working on. So buildings, grounds, and equipment. The role of the area conservation manager, we did have. For your benefit for safety engineering. Yeah. So I guess really what we're trying to convey here is, should
Want to
it
be that
like-
specific.
Yeah, should
Yeah.
be third party or specific.
Yeah.
And then for the second, we had a question, for the non-working hours, does this cover the custodial working time? And we don't feel like it's
No,
in.
it's not, yeah.
And then on number 1, versus classrooms without automated thermostats will be adjusted by the teacher. We underline that's not a practice.
Portables?
Some ours are open.
Portable windows can be open.
Ours are open.
Really?
We have a couple of, yes, it's just our,
Oh.
so you gotta keep those locked. We only open it when so, unless medically necessary. Like, some of these ones.
Yeah, they have
Yeah, if they want to go put it on secret, they see it, there should be a statement outside that says that this person has whatever, but I think that needs to be done, that makes sense. Right, that's not the case.
Yeah, right. That's okay.
Music radios, yeah, not our.
Not our walkie-talkies. It's we did not make any changes to the next one.
Or principal designee, I don't want to have one person.
Absolutely.
So I just don't want them to be like, you're supposed to hold the key, I don't hold the keys. They're just saying, my secretary.
That's right. They're organized and all.
Yeah.
We're city principal board, principal designee.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, we'll be responsible, at the end of the day, we're responsible for prior approval,
Yeah.
whether it's intentional or not. But I just want to make sure that.
ADA compliance.
On food regulations, or food service management, there's a lot of things that are spread out. The first things that we noted was right on page 2, where it talks about free and reduced school meals. Everybody gets free meals. So we know that part of the time having the first change.
So we. So like, is it 3 more years? So do we leave it? Say what is it? Like just ask, that was here's the thing, after 3 years, no, I would hope they would look at this. To make a change like this. Like right now, it doesn't apply.
So I just put duty leave and not current grant.
Yes.
And that's what I'm calling it here. Same thing with the insufficient meal card or balance, nobody has that. So it's just the question of how that is. On the fall, like, is it, the notification section, just, how it's communicated, but obviously nobody has the balances right now.
Yes.
What else did y'all have on that?
They're not. So, I mean, there's another rule. Like, and that is the issue. So I'm just trying to make sure oh, yeah, night allergies. Yes. I didn't know why they had to do this until they did it.
Does it just say alternative dash?
Or, yeah, this comes from our department. They do it, which is bad. And luckily, that's not the issue. For future, we need to stop insurances before they actually get the bill.
And we don't get away from it. They are always, you can add that.
So I guess the shopper question.
Well, they have two, technology one, and then the equipment that are under the yeah, we said that needs to be shared too.
Oh. I saw that word.
didn't know what that was.
Jonathan kept saying the word.
Yeah. We weren't really sure about what that meant. Or the testing strokes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for the food pantry. So like if you have the sharing TV, you have to have somebody who has a food pantry and all this time.
And the room.
You don't have anything else?
Okay, we did say on page 2, that register paid for the middle account balance, you don't have
We
that.
didn't mark anything in transportation, we just didn't know what we should mark.
Yes, I don't
Should
know
or
what.
should not mark.
I don't know what comes from.
Right.
This is so,
I mean, names are not
Names,
updated.
yeah.
And I think that's what we put it on the top.
Yeah.
rid of the $5 charge.
Update the titles.
About bringing those. Okay, so digital and
Give it to someone.
training opportunities. On this next one for the ones that specifically for that tutorial section, that there is no
Now, the inclement weather is, that will also, you know, determine what you're gonna serve. That's true. I'll leave that part. Under planning and preparation, more clarification.
Oh, and not what it's like.
Yeah,
right.
Very good question.
Who is this?
Yes.
I don't even know how to get the big bag thing. I've never heard of that.
So one thing they would say was that there should be an update that talks about discretionary and non-discretionary and blackout. As far as being paid, and they looked at my cameras for their lack of untapped spreadsheets, it's non-discretionary purposes.
We looked into that and no one wants to do that. You have to get your food handlers license, you have to monitor it,
Right,
for sure.
especially if they
You have to have a refrigerator and take it out.
Or if I get it, they have to go an hour.
All of those things.
I wonder if that will fall under CRB. Because like, I would say that's training for anybody who potentially is going to be.
What part of it?
And put a question.
Okay, Mike,
Ma'am.
so
what he said, that's what we said. I was like, oh, my couch are gonna be excited.
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes me nervous. It's like, sort of.
So I'm wondering if they just have to include that because that's what the state allows. They have to include that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just write first. But I'll be there wherever.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fields. How are you?
Hello, I'm great, thank you.
Good. Thank you for joining me for our post conference. I know that you're busy, so I appreciate you taking out the time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I met with the subcommittee yesterday. Everything went very well. We had talked previously about what the purpose of the subcommittee, so I'll touch on that quickly. So again, it was creating a cyclical review of the regulations, some that were 3 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old, put eyes on those. The part was, well, one of the important pieces was to ensure that we were having representation across the district from the elementary side of things. And so we invited 2 principals from each feeder pattern. We didn't get all the principals from the feeder pattern, and a number of times principals showed up late, traffic, things that happened. But yes, we understand that things happen on campus. But that was the idea, was to have that representation. So the fluidity of the grouping changed a little bit from our pre-conference with what I intentionally planned, but it still worked out well. We ended up having 2 groups to start with, a group of 5 and a group of 4. We had to catch some people up as they walked through to look through the regulations. The most important part was the beginning, where I was able to kind of explain what law was, what policy was. It was, believe it or not, there were a number of doctors in the room, so they had some familiarity with policy law. So that was quick and easy. What we ended up doing was having a large group of 4 and a large group of 5, and then we took half after the first review of regulations, broke the half apart and had them crosstalk and come up with, and then have conversations based on, well, this is how I viewed this regulation. Here's what I found here. And so at that point, we came together at the end and talked all through the rest of the process. So they were very eager participants. There were lots of ahas and sharing of best practices. So that was a piece that I wasn't anticipating, was for principals. And I, in retrospect, which principal doesn't want to talk about what they do on their campus and how it works for theirs? But we had a lot of that best practice conversation going back and forth, especially when we talked about upper elementary versus lower elementary.
Best practice as far as, say a little bit more about that.
So I've got a couple different pieces through here. So as in the procedures for, so if we look specifically in different areas, so like business and support services, food service management procedures for students with insufficient lunch funds. So we know that recently every student gets free lunch, but we never know what the future holds, and we never know what was happening in the past. And so these were seasoned principals. And so they talked a lot about what they used on their campus prior to the free lunch for all students. Regulations were, someone needed to pull the student aside, let them know they were going to get a cheese sandwich, and the kiddo got the cheese sandwich while everybody else got the hot meal. There were some bits and pieces that talked about whether there was a donation fund that parents would put in, or that teachers would put in, and that was a fund that would use to pay for that hot lunch for the student, and the ways that they would address it with the student prior to lunch happening. So there were some bits and pieces there. The records retention policy, that was a 42-page document within itself. Lots of good conversation regarding, why can't we just digitize everything? Now, as I told them, these are recommendations that we move up. These aren't necessarily decisions that we're making. So that was one of the recommendations that they made. There were a couple small ones about, hey, why don't we just get rid of cume folders and let all that be digitized? But it is what it is. We specifically talked in personnel. We hit the regulation that talked about workload. And so there was some productive conversation on the 450 minutes per week that each teacher is allotted. Within regulations, I'll give you an example. It says teacher. So then we talked about our SSTs, our student success teachers. We talked about our campus intervention specialists. We talked about our instructional coaches. Well, let me take that back. Instructional coaches are on a different contract, but your CIS and your SST are on the same contract. Most of us don't have them taking a 45-minute conference period. And we kind of related it to Dr. Rivera's ghost days. And so we thought that there could be some clarity within that regulation. But also we discussed there's PE 5 days a week plus 2 arts and music, or excuse me, 2 music and an art. So then that was good conversation about, you don't necessarily have to let them have every period if there's a student that needs acceleration, if there's a student that needs tutoring. So good conversation was built around that.
Well, I'm curious on that one, because that's always a sticking point. And I know this isn't the purpose of this conference in particular, but were principals surprised by the language in the regulation? And I mean, did they have a good baseline understanding of what we are responsible for providing to teachers? Did they have a good working knowledge of that, or were some of them kind of surprised?
Well, I think it depended on the current mindset. So previous to the 5 days a week of PE and the 2 musics and the art, teachers had potentially 1 double break day, is what we call it, 1 double break day per week. Well, now that there's 3 per week, it didn't necessarily, that double break day didn't get touched. And so it's that shift in the mindset to know that, hey, those PEs take care of all of it. And so then there's 3 extra conference periods or double break days to play with. And so I think there was just some ahas. Everybody understood the 450 minutes a week. That was a big sticking point during COVID, about the 450 per week. So again, these were seasoned principals. I think the newest principal has been in her position for 4 years only. And so she was seasoned enough to have that baseline as well.
Good. Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Under the instructional realm, there was a lot of talk about the accelerated testing procedures. So if I'm a parent, I want my child to skip the 2nd grade, that there are days and times that we hold that in specific months. The location shifted, and that was a piece of regulation that we needed to change. But there were a lot of ahas about, I didn't realize that we offered those during specific times. And so, again, that knowledge base of same procedures. The same also, and this was funny, we just talked about this at ILT, was bringing an animal to school, having a form for that.
Yes.
One principal, when she was an assistant principal, filled out that form every year because she brought her dog as a reward for students. But so she had a good knowledge base of it. But I mean, I myself, until I dug into that regulation, had no idea that that form existed. So, and then the last piece we talked about, and this was more the exhibits, and we did spend a lot of time, some time discussing between what a regulation was and what an exhibit was. The exhibit was kind of that helping piece along the way, that health services with license, where there was some conversation around how does that notice go, but that was based more in law. So we talked about, because it was based in law, that we have to give the 2 days, within 2 days, within 5 days, bits and pieces. There was a technical glitch at the end, unfortunately, when I went back to review the video. And so some of this conversation was lost. The other part was the music that was playing while people were working was a little bit louder and closer to the microphone. So the audio was a little off. I know. And I just shook my head watching it. And I thought, oh, that one breaks my heart. But everybody was an eager participant. The conversation was rich. When I asked about if they knew where to access regulations, everybody knew where it was on the website. But one particular principal in particular was very thankful for doing this because she learned a lot from the process. I won't say which one, but she's been a principal probably 6 years, and so she's like, I didn't know a lot of this existed, and she said that this is really helpful and that it's a practice that she does think should take place. Just a regular review of looking at the regulations and the reminder that, hey, there is a best practice out there and that's what it should look like. When I asked what the hottest topics were, it was that records retention piece. And because I said, if we're moving these recommendations forward, where is it that you want me to put those gold stars that the committee really spends some time on? So hottest were food for kids. One was the sharing table, because there's a lot of regulation around that. However, I think that's more FDA than it is MISD. And then the insufficient funds procedures for students. So we don't know what the future holds. So if we ever lose free lunch for all students, that's a piece that I recommend giving to the assistant sup of admin services. And then record retention. So there were 2 pieces they said, lack of storage room for that. Now, the flip side is, do we have server space to retain all those records? And then lack of knowledge, how it's unclear whether it's the rule of 7 or how long we hold on to things, to paper copies of things before we destroy it. So that'll be a piece that I recommend further. So walking away from this whole experience from the point of view of the superintendent, I feel like it promoted high standards of conduct in decision making and actions and behaviors with those bits and pieces, building the knowledge of policies and procedures for campuses across the district. And then it's really just the ensuring that policies and procedures are implemented fairly across the district. That whole equity piece of, are we all having the same most effective procedures for every student in MISD? So definitely a learning process. I am glad that this project fell into my lap. I learned a lot with it. And so I just appreciate you hearing me talk about it. And any questions you have, I'll be happy to field.
It's just a follow-up to your reflection. If you were the new superintendent to Mesquite ISD and you encountered not just these specific regulations and the conversations that you had on your committee, but you encountered the fact that we have so many regulations that haven't been touched for a long time. What would be some of your initial thoughts and reactions based on that if you just happened upon that information?
The first is an analysis of what does this process look like as a district? How often? Who's over my regulations? So is it my student services, admin service, whatever that department that holds them? And then who's responsible for that review? When's the last time that we had the review? Do we have a review that's already pre-planned? Is there a process that exists in the district already? So you're doing your due diligence to find out, is there a system or process for this? At that point, you examine it and say, okay, so if these were reviewed more recently, why isn't it documented at the bottom of the exhibit, the bottom of the regulation, to show us that it's been reviewed or adopted for follow-up, those bits and pieces. And then from there, you delegate the responsibility for oversight of it. You know, are we going to ensure that we have representation from, because regulations touch every single department or division. And so as we do this, what is the practice that will be set forth to ensure that we are having our best practices for every division and that it's written specifically for that? So
Yeah.
that would be a piece.
I agree, Mike. I mean, the first part of what you reflected on, what's the system for keeping up with it? And clearly there's some gaps and some issues in the system to begin with. But then there's the hint that if we have so many outdated regulations, then you can make the assumption then that departments are not following them. And so not only do they need to update them, but then what does that mean for what's guiding and informing their actions? And, you know, there are a lot of things that Dr. Rivera and I have discovered in the district since we've been here. And that is one of them, you know, that we have a lot of old practices that people have not kept up with. And so we have a lot of people who are making individual decisions or decisions in silos about how they're going to move forward without it being documented in a regulation that everybody has contributed to, had input on, and knows what the practice looks like. So it kind of cues you to a couple different issues in the organization that you're going to have to address.
And it's a big undertaking. We've seen, how many years has it been now? Dr. Rivera's been with us for 3 years, 4?
Michael, just to say,
you.
we're okay. I'll be right with you.
Okay. But yes, but I will tell you, I appreciate the work that y'all are doing. It is effective from the top all the way down to the student level, and we're seeing gains in the students with it. So I appreciate it, Dr. Fields. And I know that you're up against it. I bet you've got another appointment.
Yes, I do have another one. It's actually the superintendent. So I'm going to go to that next meeting. But thank you for doing this project, Mike. I mean, I know it was part of your learning, but it really was advantageous for us as a district to have you do it. So thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity and all the support you've given.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, Dr. Fields.